Okay, now let me introduce you to Juan, and he is very much into something that is of high interest for you all. Anyone has like a profile somewhere with some website or platform on the internet? Anyone? Maybe one or two or three, or you don't know? I think maybe you have a very interesting view on this one. Please.
Thank you. I have a few slides. Okay, so the objective of this talk is not really to speak about my company. In fact, I will not mention it at all until the very last slide. I would like to share a bit of the learnings that we have had over the last couple of years and what I think, what I've come to understand about the concept of reputation, what it is, and what I believe it will be, and what are going to be the challenges and debates that we will have for the next 10 years when we speak about it. So reputation is, well, in the past it was about being able to transact with one another in the market of the town. So what that meant is you would go to the market and you would buy cheese or meat from the same person over 20 years, and the reputation that you were earning over those 20 years was the reason why you would go to the same person to buy the following day. If you sold bad cheese to somebody, very quickly everyone in the network, everyone in the town would learn about it, and they would stop, all of them, they would stop buying cheese from you. So basically, reputation was a social mechanism for control. It's a way to make sure that everyone has an incentive to behave. And this happens when the network is very close, like those markets in the past. And that's how you would define a closed network. In a closed network, if an actor behaves badly against somebody, very quickly everyone else in the network is going to learn about that, and that person is going to be taken off the game, taken off the equation. It happens when you have a bad breakup with a girlfriend. Very quickly you are out of all their friends as well, right? So that's a closed network. What happens is that we no longer work in closed networks as much. Now we have more of a hybrid, and you could define this as an open network. Open networks are incredibly powerful from the point of view of brokerage. It allows you to take something that you learn here and take it there. The amount of information that travels from one place to another enables innovation, basically. The challenge with open networks is the concept that we mentioned earlier about social control. And it's the fact that if the bad actor behaves badly against the blue actor, only those people will learn about it. So only the people on the top will learn about it. The friends of the bad actor will never learn about that bad action, and that person will not be punished. So because there is no punishment, there is less social control. That's the reason why, over time, as networks became more open and we started to work in more environments with your friends from school, your friends from this, and on the internet, more obviously, and nobody knows what you are doing elsewhere, right? So that's why, over time, we have started to trust reputable third parties. It was not about the reliance on the network anymore, it was about trusting third parties. Third parties being McKinsey, right? So you don't trust John, you trust McKinsey, who works, or John who works for McKinsey, and you're paying for the brand. You don't trust the lawyer, you trust the fact that this lawyer had as customer Apple, so must be really good. You don't trust this doctor, what you trust is the fact that she got a degree from Harvard.
I don't trust anybody from Harvard.
And that's great. But today we trust the brands, or even Visa, right? I will go into Visa in a second because it's a different type of trust. So the thing with the brands is actually is probably the reason why when you go to Hong Kong, and I was in Hong Kong just a few weeks ago, and I was looking for a restaurant, and I didn't have internet with me at the time, so I couldn't check my Yelp or whatever. I ended up at the McDonald's. Now that's both frustrating and enlightening, because I mean, it was the first time I went to McDonald's in many years, and the reason for that was, well, the risk of going to McDonald's is very low. I know exactly what I'm going to get. Now, the variance of the risk of going to any other restaurant in this street is very high. I could get something amazing, or I could get something really crappy. And I decided to go for the, on average, lower quality. The expectation was lower, but the variance was much lower as well. The risk was lower, so I decided to go for that. So the reputable third parties enable that. So we have, as I said, no closed networks and open networks. And reputation is just an efficient mechanism for social control. That's what this allowing us to do. So when you put that in two axes, basically you have endorsement. So when you don't have neither endorsement or previous history, you have the unknown. When you have endorsement, it can be the third party. You have a brand extension. So you are no longer a doctor, you're a doctor from Harvard, and you are extracting the reputation from Harvard and putting that into you, okay? So that's endorsement. There is a higher layer of endorsement, which is insurance, which is Visa. You go to a company, sorry, you go to buy something, and that merchant doesn't need to trust you. They trust your Visa. They trust the fact that even if you don't have money in that Visa card, they can still get the money from Visa. That's a different layer of trust. They're not trusting the person anymore. They're trusting the third party who enables that transaction. And previous history. In previous history, you have business repetition, as we mentioned here, right, in the old towns. The business repetition was the reason why you had trust in people. Over years, over 20 years, you would earn that trust. And the layer of relationships. Nobody needs to tell me whether I can trust my mother or not. You know, my mother is my mother, so because I have that layer of trust with my mother and that relationship, I don't need anyone to endorse her. So in those both spaces, you can trust people very heavily. So I don't need anyone to endorse my mother. I'm quite happy with my mother just being my mother. And I don't need anyone I don't need to have a previous history with anyone if Visa or if there is an insurance player behind, because that's also going to ensure the transaction. And obviously the good stuff is when you have both, right? We'll go into that. So, you know, sharing economy. We do all sorts of things today with crazy people. So, yeah, so he's done everything. So, you know, sharing cars, sharing houses, you know, meeting people who have never met, Tinder, etc. What does this mean? Where is it important? Where is reputation important? And again, we have defined two axes for importance. One of them is the personal interaction, and the other one is the asset at risk. Those are basically the two things that are going to define how important reputation is or not is, or is not. So when you buy something second-hand, the value of the asset can be, you know, large or small, but the personal interaction is very low. You just send something. That's eBay. If you think about it, that's the beginning of the transactions online. It's not by chance. It's actually, when you think about it, there was a lower risk. You go into selling homes and cars, you start to prefer to use agencies and start to have more confidence in the person who's selling that house to you. When you go on to the top, you start to see that the place where it really matters to have reputation is when there is a lot of personal interaction, like caretakers or babysitters, and the value of the asset is very high. Again, your baby, especially your firstborn, is probably difficult to value. Maybe the secondborn is but so babysitters, you know, pet sitting as well, you know, renting houses. That's where reputation really matters. Where it matters less is where you have less personal interaction and the value and the asset at risk is lower. In fact, somebody would put, you know, money renting, which money renting is just, you know, microcredits, for example. I think it's lower layer, or this is a lower layer of reputation than babysitters. There is less personal interaction, and that's the reason why Kiva is going to have a very a very big focus on the personal emotion or the emotional connection with the lender and the borrower. It's all about, you know, oh, who's this person? What are they trying to achieve? Why is it important? What am I going to use this bicycle for? Whatever, right? It's that connected. Because with that, reputation becomes more important, and there is a a bigger that emotional connection is going to lead to feeling more comfortable about renting or about lending. So this is wrong. So today we get, and this was what the idea of trade is about, right? So for the layer of the transaction, we already have algorithms like blockchain that are going to enable transaction between people. But what about the layer of that history, of that endorsement, right? So what we're trying to pull together is, what if we could take all these +1s, all these star ratings from all the different sources and create like an infinite ledger of reputation that comes from all these different transactions. And this is where at the layer of, how I would say that, from a sociological point of view, this is probably the biggest shift in the last, in thousands of years, right? So we said that before, from small communities, even apes, right? Apes live in small communities, they will fight other communities, they are very integrated in their own community, into trusting brands, into trusting anyone. Into trusting anyone is a huge sociological change that is what I call those ephemeral liquid networks. What that means is I can trust you for 1 second. Once I trust you and I do a transaction with you, I don't need to worry about you anymore. It disappears. Our trust happens for a while. I get that +1 from you, I give you +1. You can use that elsewhere, I can use yours elsewhere, and that's fine, we're all fine. But I don't need to trust you anymore, so super ephemeral. And that creates all sorts has all sorts of implications, starting with what is really reputation? What is it, and what is the concept? And there are people who are defining it in different ways. You have heard people like Rachel Botsman. I think that Chelsea, what's Chelsea now? She was saying that she was working with the Collaborative Lab as well. That's Rachel Botsman's lab. She mentions that it is a currency. I actually disagree with that. I think that if it was a currency, if I give you a reputation, if I give you $1, I don't have $1 anymore. If I give you a reputation, you still have. You have more reputation. I don't have. I keep my own reputation, right? I don't lose it, unless you do something bad. If you do something bad, and I was the one recommending you, then it goes back to me. But if I give you $1 and you do something bad with that $1, I don't lose anything, right? It was your $1. So it cannot be a currency. It could look more like an asset, but an asset should give me dividends. It should not, and I shouldn't lose anything from that. But again, if those dividends that I get from my own reputation, I'm giving them to you, and you do something bad with it, it actually becomes a liability for me, because I was the one recommending you, and you did something bad. So it's difficult to put that into the concepts of currency or assets. I actually believe it is risk premium, and I will explain why in a second. Which is very basic, actually. Risk premium, right? Seems quite obvious. I will explain why. And this is where we get to the concept of the network of trust. Imagine an infinite amount of any-to-any endorsements from anyone to anyone in the world that enables us to trust one another, and that's the network of trust. Where every link is contextual. It was based on some transaction that has nothing to do with the next transaction, and where the negative links are very valuable. Which means that if you are going to transact with somebody on eBay and you find that this person has 97% positive reviews, you're going to go into the 87 reviews and check what is the negative one and what happened in that negative one. So the other 86 reviews are irrelevant. The only thing that matters is that negative one. You will want to find out what happened there, whether it was just some disagreement in the timing or something, or if there was any fraud. You're going to want to learn as much as possible about that negative transaction. The benefits of the network of trust are, I will give you a few examples. Networks is going to be different from networks of trust. Let me give you an example of a network that comes together to achieve something. Kickstarter. We come together, we kind of fund something, and that's great, but I don't need to trust you. We just happen to pay for something so that we can achieve some objective and get that product, and that's fine. I don't need to trust you, I don't lose anything from you guys not being trustworthy. I don't care. In a network of trust, you can lose. A few examples. This guy, Mohammed Yunus, when he started the microcredits in Bangladesh, the collateral was the network, a network of trust. I lend you some money. If you don't return that money, I'm going to increase the credit score, or sorry, I'm going to increase the risk premium to everyone else in your community. So you have a significant peer pressure to return the money. So the network of trust is the collateral. The people who trust you could be worse off because they trusted you, because I will increase their premium.
That, right?
Sorry?
Like, that's a very Western way to frame what he did. He built lending circles, which were peer support networks for the women to work with each other to help the collective success of their businesses.
When you look at the framework behind it, I think that what you see is a network where people who make the recommendation or that network have little to benefit from and they have a lot to lose. Or that's how you could define it, which is I can be worse off.
They did a whole set of social education and social values that went with that community, and you can't just abstract that.
Let me start a different example. Let me see if we can agree on that.
No, I agree with you. I can understand why your frame, what you're saying is correct. I think it's wrong to leave out these other important parts of what you did.
I couldn't agree more. I'm just saying that the network of trust enables that, and it's not about looking at one person as an individual, it's looking at a person as a group of people who act as collateral for each other. There are a lot more things beyond that, but this example you might agree more. You know about Friendsurance? It's a German company. They have developed a very clever network of trust where we go and buy some insurance together and we recommend each other. If I make a claim on my car, it's going to increase the premium on all my other friends. What this means is, if I have scratch on my car, I will not, and typically, or maybe in a normal situation where I'm an individual, maybe I would even crash it, against a tree on purpose just so that they can fix it for me. I would not do that if I have my friends behind it. If I have my friends behind it, I'm not, I don't want to put claims on it because I don't want to damage my friends. The only thing that my friends benefit from by trusting me is they also decrease their risk, but they are going to have a huge incentive to only trust trustworthy individuals who are likely to have less claims, less damages to their own cars. So that network of trust has, it's almost like when you follow somebody on Twitter, you have nothing to lose. When you recommend somebody in a network of trust, you could have something to lose. That's it's a very important way of thinking about the network of trust. Another example, the Amish here in the US, they don't have insurance. By religious reasons, they don't have insurance. However, they have a post-insurance, if you want to call it that way. If there is somebody has an illness in the community, everyone will put money towards the community, towards that illness. So it's like they have a resilience versus negative events that is not covered by the prepayment of an insurance. Of course, that could lead to negative incentives in terms of, when something bad happens and it's very expensive, I will just not participate. But they have super strong ties that are geographical, religious, cultural, etc., that disables them from leaving that community, because if they don't make that payment, they're going to be taken off that community, and they simply have very strong reasons to remain in that community. Again, a network of trust where that tie enables them to achieve bigger things. Another company that I know of, which I know is a very cool company, is called Seneta. These guys are in Norway. The shipping cargo industry is super opaque. Somebody can tell me how much it costs to ship something from Shanghai to here? No idea, right? It could be $10,000, could be $15,000, could be $500. I have no idea of how much it costs. These people are putting together all the people who ship stuff in different routes and crowdsourcing that information. You have to trust that the other people who are putting information into that network are making a real judgment or putting the real information. They wouldn't have to, right? In fact, there is an incentive to put wrong information, because you could be better off by showing that the value or the price of some route is lower than it really is, so that you can go to your provider and say, well, actually, it is much lower. But that would damage everyone else in the community. So they have to work on that trust to make sure that they can actually benefit from it, all of them. Again, it's what I mentioned earlier about the prisoner's dilemma. One by one, they could maximize their utility by faking the price, together that would lose all the consistency and they would all lose out. So what I'm saying with this is that the individual sparse of the sharing economy, and that's what we have learned over these couple of years, the network of trust goes far beyond that. It goes into taking the vulnerability of one person into the solidity of the network. People are very vulnerable in terms of purchasing power, in terms of, as I mentioned, the risk of a negative event that would affect people, very quickly. In terms of not having the collateral, by yourself, but you could have the collateral of a network, and a big network is going to enable all of that. The challenges that I mentioned earlier. Quick questions. Let's see what people think here. Okay, so who owns your reputation? Who thinks that they own their reputation? Okay. Or 20%. Who thinks that they don't own their reputation? Okay. Or 70% of people think that they don't own their reputation. There are shades of gray here, right? So whatever you think about me is not something I own. It's something you guys own, and collectively you will think whatever you want about whether you like this or you don't like this, right? So you own that thinking. At the same time, is what I mentioned earlier. If I have earned some reputation on eBay, why shouldn't I be able to use it elsewhere, right? In some way that people outside can trust it, right? So there are shades of who owns that reputation. What about the right to forget and the right to delete? Very big. This is a very big debate in Germany in particular. If we had the ability to delete all our reputation, then what's the point of reputation, right? There would be no point. If I can delete all the negative reviews on eBay, what's the point of having reviews on eBay? Absolutely none. Again, the value of the negative reputation is very high. It's something to manage, because maybe if you commit something wrong 5 years ago, and we have that infinite ledger of negative stuff, then it could lead to very negative outcomes. Maybe what we need is windows of how something can be important over 5 years, and maybe something that happened 5 years ago gets deleted, or something that happened with over time has less and less weight in your reputation, right? Other challenges, criminals who trust each other, right? So we could have a network of trust of criminals. And we just trust each other, and then once we have super high trust, then we go out to the open market and try to commit some kind of fraud. That's going to be a big challenge for the next few years. People left out, this is something I have spent a lot of time thinking about. People left out is people like my mother. My mother doesn't have eBay, she doesn't have Airbnb, she doesn't have any of those points that you could argue are online. How can we bring her into the world, right? Into the online world, or into the opportunities that the network of trust, or not the network of trust, the economic graph is going to enable, right? How do we help them? There are different approaches here. One approach we are taking inside Tradie, for example, is we are building some kind of PageRank of trust. So I can recommend my mother, and that automatically is going to give her part of my trust to her. So a bit like PageRank for websites, but for people, right? And finally, who should determine our reputation? Should it be algorithms? Is that inhumane? Is that is that correct? With eBay, it's very simple. It's very simple because they only do an average. There are 87 reviews, one of them is wrong, that's about 98% positive ratings. Everyone can understand that algorithm. But there are 87 reviews. Wait until you have millions of transactions in 1,000 different marketplaces doing completely different things. Who is going to assess that? Should you assess that yourself? Should you use the help of algorithms? Should the algorithms make the choice for you? Should the marketplace make the choice for you? For example, on Uber, Uber drivers who go below 4.2 stars, they are curated away. They are thrown away from the company. So there is a third party who's curating the negative people, or the bad actors, or whatever, right? So algorithms is going to be, I think it will be a big topic for the next 10 years. How much they should do, how much they should not do when it comes to something as personal as humans, right? I think it's very easy to put an algorithm on reviewing a book, and you can do Rotten Tomatoes and Amazon star ratings. For people, it's much harder. Just to finish, what we're doing at Trady, we're now decentralizing the reputation over blockchain. What that means is we are not going to own any of people's data when they enter into Trady. That means that on the one hand we are going to lose, you could call it barriers to entry, or switching cost. But we think that the value will be on any other service that come on top, like calculating how valuable that is. And secondly, we are releasing Trady.org in the next, org.trady.com is already working today, so it's not clean, it's quite dirty. And the idea is to have, all the technology we are building is to open it and enable people to build better algorithms on top, because at the end of the day we think that, as much as I said that algorithms will be a debate, I think that they are going to be very important to assess people's trustworthiness in the next few years for insurance, risk premium, all sorts of credit rating, etc. And the value should not be on who has more data. It should not be on Facebook having more data about you. It should be on how we can leverage that data for valuable things that you care about, that you can benefit from as a user. And say, well, I want to use my data, my reputation from all these sources to get a lower mortgage or whatever. So that's it. Thank you for your attention. I hope you enjoyed it.
I think it's a super important and interesting topic.